Behind me is Godmersham Estate, which was owned by Edward Knight. And Jane would have visited here. It's now private, so I can't access it. It's not like a National Trust place or anything like that. And because it's private, we've got a hedgerow going all the way round. You can't go into the grounds. So I'm at the end. So what's the history here? It does have a strong connection with Jane Austen's family. As I said, Edward Knight Austen, well, he inherited the estate from his father, adopted father, Thomas Knight II. So following his death in 1794, Edward inherited the estates, all of his estates, including Godmersham Park. Jane Austen herself was known to visit Godmersham Park. Now, she stayed here for extended periods, which provided her with inspiration for some of her novels. The estate is believed to have influenced her descriptions of grand country estates in most of her works. Think Pemberley. So the place holds a special place for Jane Austen's life and literary inspiration, primarily through her brother Edward. It's widely believed that the estate actually influenced Mansfield Park. There's no definitive proof, but there are several compelling connections. There's a very interesting plaque just here, which I think it might be worth just having a quick read. We can see it over the sun. Welcome to Godmersham Park. Now much reduced in size to approximately 900 acres, the estate and the village of Godmersham can be traced back to AD 824, when King Beowulf of Mercia granted the land of Godmersham to Archbishop Wolford. I think the important thing here is, of course, how it's gone into the hands of Edward Knight. In 1798, Edward Austen, brother of the novelist Jane Austen, moved into the house with his wife Elizabeth, knee bridges of Goodnestone. He had inherited Godmersham along with the Hampshire estates of Chawton upon the death of his third cousin and adoptive father, Thomas Edward Knight II. Jane Austen was a frequent visitor to Godmersham, often spending several weeks at a time with Edward, Elizabeth and their children, for whom she was a much-loved aunt. The core of the house remained little changed since then, and the gardens, too, would be familiar to Jane even now. Features such as the Lime Avenue, the Temple on the bank, Temple Cottage, and the Wilderness are all to the original period. Looks splendorous, doesn't it? In a 1785 depiction of Godmersham Park. Can you imagine Jane walking around here? Now, Jane frequently wrote about her visits to Godmersham Park and the grandeur of the house and the lifestyle of the gentry in her letters to Cassandra. She often commented on the daily activities, the visitors, and the social life at the estate. In a letter from 1808, she humorously described the estate as being filled with a great many children. Edward and Elizabeth had 11. Now, just down the lane is the parish church of St. Lawrence, where the Knight family would have worshipped, as well as Jane, when she visited. So Edward and Elizabeth Knight are both buried in St. Lawrence's church. So let's go and take a look. So yeah, the property is now owned by ABDO College. I've no idea what ABDO is. It sounds like OCD, doesn't it? But I do think it's connected to, ocular. So it's like a college for opticians and things like that. What I will do is put an overview of the estate, because I'm sure you can do Google and things like that. So on our way to the church, we've got this vast wall as a perimeter. And I believe the other side of the wall, it talks about Jane's fascination with the lime grove. Or I might be confusing that with Steventon, because there was a lime grove walk that they used to have. But look how the tall wall. You're going to stop any invaders coming in. I had thought in my head that I could put this telescopic tripod up to see what was inside the wall, but that's just too high. And I think there are several entrances along here that could lead out onto the lane. So Jane and the family, the Knights, coming to St. Lawrence Church to worship, they don't necessarily have to. They might have been in a modest equipage, who knows, coming out of the estate behind me, and then trundling up the the lane here to the church. But equally, they may have just had a nice walk, because there are several entrances and exits just up here. Here's one of them. Nicely well maintained. I would imagine there's a lock. Shall we try it? Oh, it opens. See the back of the house. Probably tripped some alarm. I'm always one to try something, you know. So coming to the end of the lane and the end of the estate wall, there's another gate here. Again, I'm half tempted to open it, but I'll probably get into trouble, so I'm not going to do this one. But if they came out of here, they would have walked the whole length inside the property and arrived here at St. Lawrence Church for their Sunday worship. But before we go in there, I'm just going to nip across the grass here, because there is, I think they have the tomb of Edward Knight and his wife Elizabeth in here. And of course, anywhere you go that's related to Jane Austen, they'll say, and Jane Austen did this here, and Jane Austen did that here. But of course she would have worshipped here in the church when she visited the family at Godmersham. But here, the Godmersham Park Heritage Centre, they've got a little Jane Austen exhibition, or at least I think that it's Jane Austen, but it could well be other information about the park. So before we do the church, let's go in here and yeah, we'll see if there's anything in there interesting. But I'm hoping A, that it's open, and B, they might allow me to do some filming. Godmersham Park. Who do you think that is? Is that our Jane? Look here, it was a World War I airfield as well. So I'm going to go in and hopefully we get permission to film. If not, I'll just tell you about it. I am permitted to film, so it's great. So I'm just going to have a little walk around the room. It's got some fascinating costumes, and there's some kind of literary things. There's a direct descendant of Jane Austen here. So I'll have a walk around the room and film it, and then I'll just give you a voiceover, and then we'll go out and have a look at the church. Georgian cricket team. This is interesting. Look, Francis Austen, direct descendant of Jane's brother Francis, is a regular visitor. Edward Austen Knight, there we are, Jane's brother, son of Reverend George Austen, rector of Steventon, and Cassandra Lee, brother of Jane Austen, adopted by Knight Jr., as we know. Elizabeth Bridges, so that was Edward's wife, and they lived at Godmersham Park. Fanny Knight, Edward's eldest daughter. Fanny was, I think, one of Jane's favourite nieces. Completely fascinating. I love the connection to Jane Austen, obviously through Edward Knight. There's not a lot in here it's obviously not just Jane Austen, is it? But every bump, every stone in the village has a history. And this is connected. Okay, let's go and have a look at the church. And it's nice just being in the, I want to say in the presence of, but it's not quite in the presence of, is it? But here once walked Jane Austen. Let's go and have a look at the church. It was a bit of a shame. I'd hoped that she would be in the room with me and talk me through some of the things and the connections, that kind of stuff. But just as I arrived, one of her friends arrived. They decided to have a cup of coffee instead. Anyway, we'll go and have a look at the church because it's obviously connected to the Knight family. So here we've got Jane Austen worshipped here. So yes. She would obviously have come here when she was visiting.
She was visiting Edward.
Okay.
And when she visited Edward, she would walk through probably that door.
Yeah, because that's all inside the grounds of the park, isn't it?
Yes. They might go that way and come down. They would certainly go in through that blocked up entrance.
Oh, would that have been the main entrance into the church? Okay. So do you know where Edward Knight's gravestone is? Is it in here or is it inside?
Do you know, I haven't actually researched it. But
I might just have
I can show you his plaque. You've seen his plaque.
Yeah, I came here the other week, but I want to, obviously I didn't do any filming then, so I want to do it now, but...
Right. Susanna Sackey's
I'm being guided by a very pleasant lady who obviously has connections here to the church, so I'm capturing what I can on film.
Sorry, looking alongside.
Oh, so it's being revamped or whatever.
Yes, it's being rewritten, and the wording is actually done in calligraphy inside the church. But
is this what it's actually going to say then, or is that
no? It's going to say exactly what is inside the church.
Okay, so I'll go and have a look at that in a minute then. Susanna Sackey then, the nurse who brought up the children of Jane Austen's brother, is mounted inside the church.
Well, that's probably as much as you want.
Yeah.
But, and I'll show you where the Austen pews were.
Oh, yes, okay. So when they came to worship here, they would have actually had their own dedicated location in the church.
They had, the Knight family had their own little chapel with seating above the level of the church.
Oh.
And in those days, I think the level of all of it was lower. But this was all added by the Victorians, thanks to Edward Knight Austen.
Okay.
I mean, he did all the Butterfield renovations with the rood screen.
He was a major benefactor for the little community, wasn't he?
Yes, and he instigated it, and he was, as you say, a major benefactor. This is Susanna Sackey's wording.
Ah, okay. And that's what they're going to do on the main...
what will be written on the new stone.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Right underneath Edward's It's
So that's
monument.
like the...
That's Edward's monument.
That's fascinating. Now I can point that there. They had issue of 11 children, of whom the 9 surviving have caused this monument to be erected to the memory of their beloved parents. In the family vault beneath are deposited the remains. So is this the family vault exactly here, or does it refer to somewhere within the church, do you think?
No, it refers to outside the church.
Oh, okay.
Where we saw the plaque on the wall.
Ah, okay.
Near there.
Okay.
But the original Austen night pews were, this was the end wall of the church.
Okay.
And there was an entrance outside to these 2 covered separate chapels, as it were,
Okay.
with seating above.
Oh.
And they could sort of sit up there and see the rest of the people in church and see what was going on in the pulpit.
And of course they've got a good view of the pulpit,
Yes.
haven't they? So straight across there. Wow.
It's very good in the Roger 21.
That sounds very Latin.
It is. It's Canterbury Archaeology Society.
Oh, okay.
And a chap called Tim Chawton Brown is really the expert on this church and wrote a piece about it.
And I saw one last monument on the wall there. So that's a dedication to Edward Knight. But this one here says Thomas.
Again, he called himself Knight. He was really born Thomas May. But to inherit the Knight land, he took the name Knight.
Okay.
And the broken pillar is symbolic of the broken bloodline.
So he was Edward Knight's adopted father then, wasn't he?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Edward, and he also was adopted by the real Knight.
Oh, okay. Fascinating.
So he started off
In compliance
Thomas
with the
May.
will of Sir Thomas May. Yeah, okay.
There's a sort of potted history in him.
That is fascinating. I knew that that Edward Knight was adopted by Thomas, but I didn't realise that Thomas himself was an adopted child.
Yes, I mean, it's my friend.
Okay.
She's waiting for me.
Thank you very much. It was fascinating. I don't know how much of that I can edit and put in, but I'm going to leave as much of that in as possible, simply because when you tap into someone's knowledge, she obviously works here, let it flow. Just allow the conversation to happen, you know. It says here, Jane Austen. Jane Austen was a regular visitor to Godmersham in the early years of the 19th century because of her brother Edward owned the park. He had been adopted, which we know. The mansion was built by Thomas May. I am going to have to look that up, but I shall take that with me. So fascinating. Little bit of information there. We've got these 2 epitaphs, haven't we? One to Sir Thomas Knight, who was Edward's adopted father, and one to Edward and Elizabeth. And I thought that was rather fascinating about Susanna Sacre, faithful servant and friend for nearly 60 years. Now I have actually done some reading of Jane Austen's letters, and I think Fanny Knight factors a lot in the letters, as does Susanna Sacre. I think that's for another video though. Maybe the Letters of Jane Austen could be good. Right, I'm going to go over to Gunstone, and I think it's about time to conclude the video. Yeah, just great stuff. Let's go over to Gunstone and have a look at where Sir Brooke Bridges lived and where Elizabeth, his daughter, called family home, where Edward Knight would then marry into that family.